Yo, what's going on, friends? Not here with a quick meta guide on the TBC Holy Paladin this time. And of course, first things first is a little disclaimer. This is intended as an overview of TBC life for the spec, broken down into the parts I was seeking as a consumer. And these are, first, the PvE basics, talents, stats, gameplay, that kind of stuff. We'll finish off the basics with a very brief mention on race choice, and following this we're going to take a look at the strengths and limitations of the spec, or put differently, why you would or wouldn't play this spec. Finally, this video will take a broad look at professions and PvP, but if you're seeking granular level detail, you may want to check out some specific videos after you've checked out this one, of course. So let's not hang about. Similar to most healer specs, there is a core set of points that form the essential foundation of the spec, with the remaining points leaning in a certain direction, usually, but ultimately being at your discretion. In the case of Holy Paladin, there are 42 core points that you'll see across pretty much every single build, starting with Divine Intellect for the fat mana, pushback protection from spiritual focus, followed by the quality of life and raw performance of Healing Light, Aura Mastery, and improved Lay on Hands. Next, we're taking 5 out of 5 Illumination for efficiency, whilst also taking improved Wisdom because we are the only Paladin spec that ever gets down this far in Holy. Divine Favour and Holy Power are no-brainer. Crit boosts, with Sanctified Light being the best benefit to get down to Holy Power, though you could feasibly go elsewhere if you wished. We take all the remaining points aside from Blessed Life, at least for the core fundamentals. We are going to talk about Blessed Life shortly. This then leaves us with 19 points to throw around as desired. Typically you're going to want to grab Guardian's Favour in the proc tree for more life-saving bot potential. So often is the case that you're going to grab King's 2 to help cover all buffs in the raid if something's missing, etc. Likewise, Improved Might is a typical pickup for the same reason in the ret tree, and this then leaves us with 3 points to go anywhere, and most people opt for Blessed Life, as we discussed just a moment ago in the Holy Tree, as it aids raid survivability to a pretty good degree, even though it is RNG based. Alternatively though, if your sure buffs are fine without certain points, perhaps you've got 4 paladins in your raid roster, there are other builds that take the slight mana efficiency from Purifying Power alongside the resistance talents such as Pure of Heart. However, this is a relatively small gain at the cost of quite a bit of raid versatility, or flexibility I should say. So, typically you'll take the standard 45-11-5 build. A quick mention is that if your composition is lacking paladins, it may be useful to take improved Seal of the Crusader over Blessed Life with the final 3 points to provide 3% crit to the raid, but you'd much rather have a rep paladin provide it and refresh everyone's seals with Crusader Strike so you don't have to reapply your seal. Now at this stage I usually look at stats, but I can't cover stats without discussing gameplay briefly in this case, so let's switch it up. Your bread and butter remains Flash of Light. You can downrank, but it's nowhere near as appealing as it is in vanilla, thanks to the nerfs to downranking. Holy Light can be used with high haste builds, or just to try snipe some big scripted abilities on the tanks, and in some cases, with these big scripted hits, it's often correct to use rank 5 Holy Light in advance to have a Light's Graced, aka faster, max rank Holy Light for those spikes. However, most of the time it's just flash spam. Even Holy Shock is quite a rare cast, though you can reasonably use it to level off any moderate spikes, but flash is just the best tool for nearly all damage patterns and situations that are available to you. So essentially the gameplay is applying Judgment of Light, which will mostly be maintained by the Ret Paladin's Crusader Strike, but you will want to refresh it if it falls off, whilst spamming Flash of Light and having some consideration for Holy Light usage for scripted heavy damage. You can also use Holy Shock for scenarios where a flash will not land in time, so super emergency times. I know some of you may have been hoping for different news, but sadly it isn't until Wrath of the Lich King that Holy Paladin becomes an omnipotent Giga Chad, and then you can get your revenge. Because revenge is best served cold, Ice Crown, get it? Yeah, I know, that was about as flat as flash spamming for another expansion, but them's the breaks. Just before we pivot away from this discussion, I do want to add that I found a couple outlier players from private server logs that were putting up top end results for Holy Palas with Holy Light that featured a little bit more haste in tier 6 and beyond. Unfortunately, it's pretty difficult to find reliable Holy Paladin information, but I do want to point out that it would not surprise me if there was some innovation come Classic TBC from serious Holy Paladins, whereby they are min-maxing Holy Light gameplay, probably with some Likes Grace shenanigans, to slightly better results than the standard Flash of Light spam. With that said though, it's still pretty much going to be one button gameplay. The only thing that may differ is what flavour of button you're spamming. Moving on swiftly, since Flash is the go-to once again, haste value is middling at best since, Flash is already a very fast cast. Haste can be used to spam Holy Light, but even then you're not going to go ham on stacking it, and it's a fairly rare stat till tier 6 level content anyway. As such, with haste lower on the priority, the focus is on intellect, crit and MP5 besides the obvious plus healing. Intellect is unusually high on the priority list compared to other healers thanks to Holy Guidance in tandem with Divine Intellect, whilst every 80 intellect provides us 1% crit in TBC, a nerf from vanilla but still very relevant when combined with the aforementioned talents. Speaking of crit though, you're probably familiar with the Illumination talent. It is nerfed from vanilla once again, so yeah, Holy didn't got double dipped on nerfs, but hey, it's still a great talent, and of course crit gives us bigger heals, so we are interested in crit. It just so happens that intellect is more attractive comparatively now thanks to the Illumination nerf and the intellect changes to mana regen that came in 2.4. Finally, let's touch on MP5. Its value is variable. Some people are very high on MP5 at the expense of crit, and vice versa, since they do similar things for Holy Paladin. But ultimately, it's pretty hard to avoid MP5 regardless, and it's pretty good baseline. Tuning will determine the exact value of these two secondary stats together. Shorter fights will undoubtedly place crit higher, but if fights go long, and some do go long regardless of the damage in the raid, MP5 likely pulls ahead thanks again to that Illumination nerf. This brings us to why you may want to play Holy Paladin, and to be honest, this stumped me. At a glance, this spec is literally just a worse version of vanilla Holy, truth be told, but if you watched a video of mine before, you already know that I am a fan of memes and low-key reasons to play certain specs. Let's start with reason number 1, which is honestly pretty innocent. Holy Paladin is demanded far more than people are willing to play it in TBC. TBC brings huge reasons to play Prot and Ret, whilst basically slapping Holy with a nerf stick. So you can ultimately be the last Holyden standing and have your pick of guild that suits you, especially if you happen to be a Horde Paladin, since the population of Paladins will be lower by default. But don't hold on to that rather benign reason. Sure, you probably get a comfy raid spot for playing the ugly duckling spec of the healer squad, but here is the real magnum opus. And yes, I do the Latin on rare occasions like this. Let me just...
Ascendit fumus flatus ego culi.
Yeah, for real, I really tried to find some quirky reasons to want to play Holy Paladin. Really I did. But after literal days of searching, the only thing I could arrive at was that you're the only Paladin with enough time to think about trolling people in the raid with bops and divine interventions. Because not much has changed for Holy Paladin from vanilla, you're really only playing Holy Paladin if you already enjoy its vanilla incarnation and enjoy the idea of being one of the few to play this spec compared to the many you see on Alliance side in vanilla. And this then brings us to the negatives, which we've kind of touched on briefly already, and they all stem back to not a lot of additions being made to Holy Paladin. It stood still as a spec mostly whilst others got a lot better. Primarily, the main drawback for many is that the moments of glory are few and far between. Yes, you can still do those big bot plays to save a Warlock's life when they spam Shadowbolt just a little too hard, but on raw output, it's pretty middling, with the peaks on fights like Morrigram Tidewalker not really qualifying as a moment of glory because it's nothing that other healers cannot do. As such, the Blessing of Protection button will be your primary source of glory in your raid group's lore. Likewise, we have covered that the blaze style does not really change much from vanilla to TBC. You're still pretty much spamming Flash of Light, perhaps Holy Light in future. As such, you're not really rewarded with performance or intrigue in the gameplay. Ultimately, the biggest limitation of the Holy Paladin is that you need to be all in on the theme and feel of Holy Paladin to avoid wanting to put it down for a shiny TBC boosted spec. Sounds pretty depressing, but that is the TBC landscape for Holy Paladin, unfortunately. On to something more positive though, both race and professions have a lot of flexibility. Obviously, Horde side you have one choice, Alliance side you've got several, but by and large, for Holy Paladin specifically, it doesn't matter too much. You get a little tickle of Spirit as a human, though Spirit's value is pretty much in the dumpster for Holy Paladin, so it's pretty much a non-event. You've got Draenei, which will provide hit to your group, which makes them technically the best option, though in the group you're typically going to be in, doesn't really matter. And in case of Dwarves, you do have Stoneform, which is relevant, especially in PvP, but ultimately not really a massive deal for PvE min-maxing. So the TLDR Alliance side, play Draenei if you really care about eking out tiny edges, but ultimately it's really not a factor either way. Pick what you enjoy. And this brings us to professions, which again I mentioned has a lot of flexibility. Whilst tailoring is very good because it gives us the Primal Mooncloth set alongside the White Mend set bonus, your Phase 1 best in slot only includes the Mooncloth belt, with world boss drops and tier set giving you slightly more value. As such, there's no obligation to go tailoring aside from squeaking out a very small gain over the second best belt for Phase 1. Though it is worth mentioning that the Mooncloth belt is very close to Phase 2 BIS also. Likewise, Leatherworking has the Windhawk set, which is pretty nice, but only the braces end up being your best in slot for Phase 1, though again, the Windhawk braces are exceptionally close to the Phase 2 best in slot also. On top of this, we got real confirmation recently that drum usage is being dramatically culled with the Tinnitus debuff, which essentially means you don't really need to go leatherworking either, despite there being some nice gear options. Enchanting is the biggest static gain you can achieve from professions, as it provides 40 healing to rings across all phases. So if you're into min-maxing, it's definitely the one to lean towards, though 40 healing is not going to make or break you. Dual crafting has some merit as always with the slightly better gem, and in the end game providing the best in slot neck, which is reasonably ahead of the second best option compared to other healers having a much harder, closer look at the two top options for this slot. Notably, Alchemy provides a strong endgame trinket, which is considered BIS game or very close to it, and Blacksmithing also provides the opportunity to craft a late game chest that is once again very close to BIS game, although just a tiny bit worse than one of the male options in Sunwell Plateau. It's worth noting that all three of these professions just mentioned don't really provide anything significant until Sunwell Plateau though, so do keep in mind that if you're interested in gathering, engineering, etc. for your early game professions, you can do that. It's not until the late game for healers, in particular Holy Paladin, where the actual professions become more and more relevant. Enchanting is the only one that sticks out like a sore thumb here. This then brings us to PvP, which sadly doesn't hold any real positive news either. You can do just fine in both 2s and 3s, but I'd be misleading you if I suggested that there were any real perks to playing Holy Paladin over Disc Priest or Resto Druid. Likewise, Resto Shaman will typically see more success on average. It's not that Holy Paladin is bad, it's just that it excels to a greater extent the larger the group is. In 2s, life will be a lot harder and you're mostly filling into most comps just as a suboptimal version of a Disc or Resto Druid. After scouring several ladders on private servers, it seems that all the Seal Twisting servers had Retribution Paladins as the highest 2s rated Paladin, with very few Holy Paladins present near the top of the ladder. In 3s, it's a lot more promising, but still not fantastic. You do pretty well in double healer comps, though again, you're slightly suboptimal compared to Resto Druid Disc. and you can have success with melee cleaves. You can also fill into the kinds of comps that Resto Shamans do well with in 3s, such as Turbo, but needless to say, it's just not as good as having a Resto Shaman. Now, I don't usually cover 5v5 as it's hard to find consistent information about it, as well as it having the most variables. However, when I looked into Holy PvP and TBC, it kept coming up over and over again that Holy Paladin has a real strength in 5s, and in particular, an Arms Warrior, Rep Paladin, Enhanced Shaman, Disc Priest and Holy Paladin is one of the best 5s comps that plays relatively straightforward, which means it can be quite an accessible comp for you and your friends to get into and do well with. As a closing observation, if you're serious about Holy Paladin and want to PvP without feeling suboptimal for your partners, 5s is the way, and that comp apparently is super strong. That's about it though. Sorry that I couldn't find many positives for my Holy Dins, but hey, if you already enjoy it, run it back. With that said, I'll see you next time, hopefully in your notifications.